ending enhanced Obamacare subsidies. And contrary to Democrats' claims, President Trump has said he'd like to make a deal on great health care for Americans once the government reopens. But while the fiscal tab and human toll climb each day the government remains closed, Democrats are escalating attacks on the Trump administration's global tariffs, the one policy that's actually bringing money in. Since those tariffs took effect in April, hundreds of billions of dollars have flowed into federal coffers from foreign nations finally paying for access to our markets. The president says the long-run haul could reach into the trillions. That's right, trillions with a T. Democrats shut down the government, costing us millions per day, while criticizing the only policy that's paying for itself and putting America first. One side spins and stalls, while the other delivers results that strengthen the economy and could soon put real money back in Americans' pockets. The administration's trade agenda is producing measurable gains, with meaningful deals already on the books and many more in the pipeline. And as the president's top trade advisor told me, fair trade wasn't a partisan issue until now. So why the shift? Here's my conversation with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Ambassador Jamieson Greer, thank you so much for spending a little time with us. You have a big job. We have seen that the tariffs have already brought in billions of dollars. The president says it could become trillions of dollars. Give me your take as the U.S. Trade Representative. What could these tariffs mean long-term for the United States?
You've talked about the magnitude of the tariffs, which is great. That when we take in a tariff, that money doesn't disappear. It goes to the Treasury for use by the U.S. government for a variety of different things. But importantly, those tariffs, they also help to reshore and protect U.S. production. It's a huge part of the president's campaign, huge part of his presidency, and that's what we expect to happen from these tariffs.
On Truth Social this week, the president talked about the fact that inflation is down and that prices are down. From your perspective, dealing with this day in and day out, where do you see things right now as it relates to prices and inflation?
Well, we're just looking at the data, and when you look at the data, inflation is in check. In fact, when you look at the first term when the president put in tariffs against China, inflation actually went down at one point. And so it's not surprising to me that now, as we see tariffs come into play, that we have not seen huge inflationary effects. And in fact, we've seen real wages going up for workers while inflation's in check. That means everyone has more money to play with in their life.
Right now, you have the tariffs sort of in limbo, and it is going to be a decision that ultimately the Supreme Court makes. They're going to start looking at this on November 5th as to whether or not the president actually had the authority to issue these tariffs under the Emergency Powers Statute. Do you have a feeling on one direction or another that this goes? And if they do say, hey, we can't have these tariffs anymore, I think you said there could be another route, a route to go for the United States to possibly bring in money from these other countries.
Well, it is incredibly important that we win this case. The president has used this statute exactly the way it was intended to be made, to manage a national emergency, and that's what we're facing with our deficit and the offshoring and everything that gave rise to it. Now, if we lose the case, that would be a disaster, right? It would be a disaster for the country, it would be a disaster for the Treasury, it would be a disaster for our negotiations. Could we find another way to try to get to this outcome? I mean, the tariffs are going to be a part of the landscape, and we'll find a way, but this is the best way. This is the way that Congress has identified for the president to get to that outcome, and it's the way he's been using it. But we're ready to do whatever we need to do to make sure we get the outcomes we need.
What do you make of people who are supposed to represent the American people, that, they're representatives here in Washington, D.C., fighting so hard against something that has made trade barriers kind of break down in so many respects and leveled the playing field for the United States, brought in $250 billion, like you just mentioned, and is obviously working for the American people. What do you make of that? Why would people want to fight against that?
So I'm glad you asked that, because until recently, trade was not exactly a partisan issue. And there was broad support for having fair trade among both Democrats and Republicans. And so now when I see folks opposing tariffs or opposing fair trade, I think they're just doing it to score political points. I think everyone knows that the system has not been working for Americans, regardless of their political stripes, and that the president's actions are, first of all, way overdue and effective for Americans of all political stripes.
And let me ask you about this president, because I know you worked during the first Trump term, the first administration. You worked under Bob Lighthizer at the time. So maybe give me your Donald Trump 1.0 and Donald Trump 2.0 assessment from your position.
Well, the first term felt incredibly successful. It was incredibly successful. We put tariffs on China and had a deal with China. We replaced NAFTA. We got a deal with Japan. We revised our Korea deal. But this term, everything is in the stratosphere. It almost doesn't compare. We're negotiating with 40 or 50 countries right now. Every day, on behalf of the president, I'm speaking to trade ministers, foreign ministers, presidents and prime ministers of many countries who want to go along with the U.S. in the new trade policy. I've only been confirmed since February. I'm pretty tired, but I'm really excited because the president has given us incredible amounts of leverage, and he's given us all the steer we need to go out and do what's right for the American people.
And when it comes to securing leverage for America, there's one trade relationship that immediately comes to mind. Well, Ambassador, I know one of the things that people probably always want to ask you about is China. How did we end up in such a bad spot with China trade-wise?
So in the late 90s, there was a policy conversation in Washington and in the business community about whether we should give China most favored nation treatment, which means they could import with the low tariff rates that the rest of the world enjoyed. And they opened our borders to Chinese goods. And predictably, a lot of American manufacturing went overseas to China so they could take advantage of the low labor, low environmental, all those different things happening there, and then ship them back to the U.S. with no tariffs or very low tariffs. And so that's the genesis of a lot of this. We lost, 5 million jobs, 60,000 factories. It was a really damaging time. In the first Trump term, we imposed tariffs on China to try to level the playing field for all of their intellectual property theft and stealing American technology. And actually, the Biden administration kept those in place because they were so effective. And then when President Trump came in again, more tariffs were imposed on China, along with our general global program of tariffs to try to reshore supply chains and protect our economy. What we're trying to do is find a way to do that where we can protect U.S. national security, protect our domestic producers and our workers, but at the same time have a healthy trade relationship with China. I hope we can get there.
While the U.S.-China trade relations remain unclear, we asked Ambassador Greer to take a moment for reflection. What has been the most challenging part of your role, and what has been maybe the most rewarding part of your role?
Well, I think that what has been challenging is just finding a way to efficiently negotiate all of these deals. At the beginning of the administration, people said the president won't be able to impose tariffs on the world, and if he does, everyone will retaliate. We've proved all of that wrong. People didn't retaliate. Countries came to the table to negotiate. We've concluded deals, and we're finalizing many of them right now. And so doing all of that in a short, 7 to 8 months, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative has never done anything like that. They've never moved with that speed. And I would say that the most fulfilling part is frankly working with other Americans. We work with everybody. We work with big business, we work with small business, we work with the unions, we work with civil society. We get to see a huge swath of the economy, and we all work together to try to deliver for America. And it has been it's been incredibly fulfilling to see everyone come together to make it happen.
Another important topic during my conversation with Ambassador Jamieson Greer: potential tariffs on the movie industry. President Trump is weighing a 100% tariff on movies filmed outside of the U.S. Here's what the trade representative had to say about that.
When a film is produced somewhere else, that means that the workers, the staffers, the caterers, the construction workers, not just the actors, but all of those folks, they're being employed overseas. So right now, we're looking into an investigation to get to the bottom of these foreign trading practices, take a look at why films are going overseas as opposed to staying here, and take action as appropriate. We want to get to the bottom of this issue and try to fix Hollywood, as the president says.
I want to bring in someone who knows the ins and outs of Hollywood and movie production, actor Zachary Levi. Thank you so much for joining us. So let me get your reaction right off the top to what you just heard there. President Trump says that he wants to consider a 100% tariff on movies that are made outside of the U.S. He says our movie-making business has been stolen from the United States of America by other countries, just like taking candy from a baby. So, Zachary, what do you think of that?
I mean, listen, he's not wrong. You know, productions have been fleeing for a long time. They've been going to Canada for decades, and now Europe has incredible incentives. And there's also really no unions that you have to deal with, for the most part, out over in Europe. And so the cost of production is significantly lower, and therefore, you know, the industry is going to keep going there. We're going to keep having runaway productions that go to Europe. But I do think that this is a very... this is a tricky thing because film is not like a factory that's making widgets. It's not like we're offshoring jobs that could be here, you know, very logically. There are films that need to be shot in Europe sometimes. Sometimes that is the backdrop. Sometimes you need to tell a story that takes place in the UK or takes place in Spain or takes place in Italy or something like that. So I think that we have to be very careful about how we're implementing that stuff. I think that it would be far more advantageous if President Trump were to look into incentivizing, as opposed to penalizing productions that are going to Europe or other places in the world, incentivizing productions to stay in the United States. In the same way that there are states that have incentive programs. Texas just passed an incredible filming incentive program there. Lots of other states in the United States, Georgia as well. If there was a federal incentive, there was something that, and I'm a libertarian, by the way. I don't like to tread into these waters too much. But I do think that if we want to combat losing these jobs to other countries, no, we don't. But if we want to combat losing these jobs and this income and this industry to the rest of the world, then I think that it would be advantageous for us to look at some kind of a federal incentive program that lures these companies back, that lures these productions back.
Yeah, well, we know this is a president who likes to do a little bit of both of those things. So, you know, that could be on the horizon as well. But it sounds like, Zachary, you're ready for movie production. I know that you are building a huge $100 million studio in Austin, Texas. With all the bells and whistles, it sounds like you're going to be able to accommodate some of these productions. So tell us a little bit about that. What made you want to go down that path?
I mean, the long and the short of it is when I started working in Hollywood 26 years ago, I saw behind the curtain, I saw how all the sausage was made, and I was really heartbroken because it's ultimately an industry that doesn't really care about the audience and it doesn't care about the artists. By and large, I think there are many people that work in the industry who do, but the system itself is corrupted. It's broken. It's been broken since the beginning. This is why Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks and all those silent era OGs started United Artists because they knew that the artists were being taken advantage of and they needed to have more agency and more control over their product and being able to, you know, to take care of themselves and the art. And I think we've needed that ever since then. I think that we are in dire need of a studio, an independent studio that really values the artists, really values the art and the audience. I think that, you know, so much agenda has been infused into all of the content that we watch on all of the different streaming platforms and all of the theaters. And I think people are really over that. I don't think we want all of that agenda just forced down our throat. I think that we need to create a place where independent artists don't need to be beholden to the broken system. And so I've felt this calling on my life for a long time. More than that, I think it's imperative at this point, particularly with AI. AI in the next few years is going to eviscerate my industry. It is going to, already, I mean, you can look at what's happening with Sora and Google Veo and all of these things. I mean, it's becoming almost impossible to tell the difference between what is real and what is not. And that's going to affect news. It's going to affect everything, right? So I think we need to create a space that really holds the line and protects human jobs in the arts and entertainment. I believe it's imperative that we do something like this. And I also think that I really like what I'm building at